guys, it's Alice, and today I am going to recommend a bunch of books for you. Now, this summer is gonna be a little bit different than usual, and I don't know what it's like where you are, but at least here in Norway, none of us will really be traveling a whole lot, which is not the end of the world at all, because traveling is a huge privilege, but it maybe does suck a little bit. So one of my favorite things about books is that they can transport you all over the world and you don't even have to leave your house, which is perfect for the times we find ourselves in. So I have got a bunch of books that I want to recommend to you that will take you everywhere. I will say, the books that I've picked out are not travel books. They're books that have amazing settings and books that are easy to sort of get lost in and escape in, if that makes sense. And we have all kinds of different genres, so there will hopefully be something for everyone. We're going to start with some mystery novels because I feel like a lot of people use these kinds of books as like beachy summer reads, and the first ones I have are The Dry and Force of Nature, both by Jane Harper. These two books are in a series, and the first one is The Dry and the second one is Force of Nature, and we follow the same detective in both of them, and they will take you all the way to Australia. Now, The Dry is set in this small town during a heat wave where this detective returns to after one of his best friends has committed suicide, but then things don't really add up, so he ends up staying a while. And then Force of Nature is set in the Australian bush, and it's about these women who go on a corporate retreat and something really odd happens while they're in this forest. What I love about these so much is that not only are they very intriguing, but the atmosphere in them is just amazing, and you can so vividly picture the setting, and it's the perfect type of book to read when you sort of want to escape a little bit. Another mystery novel that will take you on a little bit of a trip is A Meditation on Murder by Robert Thorogood. This is much more lighthearted than the books by Jane Harper, and this is set on a fictional island in the Caribbean where we meet a detective who is very grumpy and he hates the heat, and he is investigating this murder that has happened inside of a locked room. And this is just, like I said, very light, very entertaining, doesn't take itself very seriously, and sometimes it's a little bit ridiculous, but if that's what you're in the mood for, this is perfect. It's the first book in a series called Death in Paradise, so if you like this book, there are also 3 other books that you can continue with. Then we've got one of my favorite books that I read last year, and it is Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. This is set in North Carolina in the 60s, and in it we meet this young girl who lives out in the marsh all by herself, and she is infamous in the nearest town as this wild child. And then when a man turns up dead in this town, people suspect that she had something to do with it. Now, the book is not focused that much on like the mystery aspect of it. It's much more about getting to know this girl who is living out here by herself, and it's just such a lovely book if you like these types of sort of coming of age stories. And the descriptions of the nature and the setting in this book is just beyond. It is so beautiful. Next, we can take a trip to Japan with Sweet Bean Paste by Durian Sakagawa. I literally cram this book into any recommendation video that I can because I just think it's so lovely. The story is about unlikely friendship, and we meet this man who is working in a dorayaki shop, and he's very unhappy with his life. But then one day this elderly woman comes into the shop, and this changes his whole life. And it is sort of a quiet story in a lot of ways. It's character driven, but it's just so sweet, a little heartbreaking, and just wonderful. Another book that will take you to Japan and that I also recommend all the time is Strange Weather in Tokyo by Hiroomi Kawakami. Now, this one is a little weird and maybe not for everyone, but if you like slightly odd, calm stories, you might like this. It's about this 30-year-old woman who is quite unhappy, but then one day she runs into her old teacher and they strike up a friendship. And what's really cool about this book is that there is so much food in it and so many descriptions of food. So if you like reading about that, this is perfect. And I just think it's really weird, but really good. Moving on, we have a book by one of my favorite authors, and it is Half of a Yellow Sun by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. This will take you to Nigeria in the 1960s, where we meet a 13-year-old boy, we meet a professor and his mistress, and then we also meet an Englishman. And all of these characters are in each other's lives, I guess. And the story is about what happens to all of them when the country descends into turmoil. And I love Adichie's writing. No one writes characters just like her, and it's just such an interesting and emotional and well-written story. Then we have got Homegoing by Ya Gyasi. If you somehow missed this book when it was all the rage, maybe now is the time to read it. It's a really cool book. It starts off in Ghana in the 18th century, where we meet two sisters and their lives take very different turns. And what is so cool about this book is that each of the chapters introduces a new character that are descendants from one of these sisters. So we follow these two different lines throughout history, and it takes us from Ghana to America up until the 21st century, I'm pretty sure. And it's just such an interesting story, and it will take you to all of these different places in all of these different times. Next, we have got a book that does have a little bit of travel in it, and we get to see loads of different locations, and it is Washington Black by Essie Dugin. This is historical fiction, and we meet this 11-year-old field slave in Barbados who becomes the manservant of his master's brother. And this brother turns out to be a little bit of a scientist, and he ends up taking this boy on his adventures with him. So this will take you all the way from the Caribbean up until the freezing north. And it's a sort of a coming-of-age story, and it touches on a lot of really interesting themes, and I think it's just a really good book and very easy to get lost in. Another book that also has a little bit of travel in it is We the Drowned by Karsten Jensen. This is again historical fiction, and it starts off in this little Danish town in 1848, and we follow the people who live in this town as well as the men from it who go out to sea. And this spans over several decades, and it takes us all over the world, and it's pretty epic. Then we have got yet another book set in the Caribbean, and it is Sugar Money by Jane Harris. This is set in Martinique in 1765, and the story is about these two brothers who are charged by their master to travel to another island and steal back a bunch of slaves that he thinks belongs to him. And the story is about what happens when they do that, and I really don't want to give anything away, but this is well written, it has amazing characters, and it discusses a lot of really interesting and important topics, and the setting is excellent. Next, we have got The Sport of Kings by C.E. Morgan. This is set in Kentucky, and it's a family saga about race, slavery, humanity, and family legacy, and it's about this group of people who are brought together by horse racing. Now this is pretty epic. The descriptions are incredible, and it's filled with fascinating but quite unlikable characters. So if you don't like reading about characters that you might not like, I would steer clear of this one, but if you like reading about those types of people, this is pretty great. Then, taking a trip to historical France, we have Perfume by Patrick Suskind. This is the story of a boy who has an incredible sense of smell, and this ability eventually makes him commit murder. It starts off in Paris, and this is such a weird book, but it's just incredible in the way that it describes smells. Like, it really transports you to this place, and honestly it is kind of disgusting sometimes, but it's very vivid and haunting, and I just think it's a very unique story. Second to last, we have another kind of a weird book, and it is Beauty is a Wound by Eka Kurniawan. This is an epic tale of history, family, and tragedy, and the story is about this beautiful prostitute and her 4 daughters, and the story will take you to Indonesia. Now, the best way to sort of describe the way this is written is that it's like a spider web. The story will take you in all of these different directions, but they all lead back to the same center, if that makes sense. If you don't like weird books, this isn't for you, but if you do, and you like a little bit of magical realism and a little bit of like darkness, this is a great one to read. All the way at the end here, we have one of my favorite nonfiction books that is actually a travel narrative, and it is Over the Edge of the World by Lawrence Bergerine. This is the epic story of Ferdinand Magellan and his attempt to circumnavigate the whole globe in the 1600s, and at that time no one had ever done that before. And this is about this 3-year odyssey, and we get to visit all of these different places, and it's just filled with adventure. And this is one of those books that was never ever boring to me. So if you like history and you like adventure, this is the perfect book. It's just so good. Okay guys, that was a lot, but those were all of the books that I had to recommend for you today. I hope some of you will find this a little bit helpful, and I'd love to know what your favorite setting to read about is, and what your favorite book is that has taken you to an exciting place. And I'll see you soon. Bye!